The room buzzed with quiet anticipation as the audience shuffled in, murmuring softly among themselves. Bright lights reflected off the polished stage floor, casting golden glimmers that danced across the walls. At 9 years old, most children were still exploring the world in their own playful way, but tonight, one little boy was about to make the world pause, to hold its breath, and to listen. Michael's small frame seemed fragile under the harsh stage lights, yet there was a quiet determination in his eyes that spoke of a strength far beyond his years. He carried with him not just a voice, but a story of courage, dreams, and unbreakable spirit. His mother's hand rested gently on his shoulder, offering comfort, a silent promise that no matter what happened, he was never alone. The audience hardly noticed her. They were too focused on the boy who, for most of them, was just a tiny figure standing nervously by the microphone. But there was a calm in Michael, a sense that he had rehearsed not just the notes of the song he was about to sing, but the emotions, the memories, the very essence of what he wanted to share with the world. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and began. The first note came out soft, trembling almost, like the tentative steps of a child learning to walk. But then it grew stronger, richer, more confident, until the room was filled with a sound that seemed impossible to have come from someone so young. Every note carried the weight of his story, every phrase painted a picture of his journey, of nights spent dreaming in a small bedroom, of quiet afternoons filled with music and hope, of the courage it took to step onto a stage that seemed far too big for him. As Michael sang, memories unfolded like delicate petals in the hearts of the audience. They saw a boy not just singing, but expressing every triumph and fear he had ever felt. They imagined him sitting at his small piano at home, fingers trembling as they pressed down on the keys, a mother watching silently, tears brimming in her eyes. They imagined the long walks to school, the teasing from classmates who didn't understand his passion, the nights when he had cried himself to sleep, wondering if his dreams were too big for such a small boy. But here he was, and suddenly, none of those struggles mattered. What mattered was the courage, the resilience, the sheer brilliance of a young soul refusing to be dimmed. His voice soared higher and higher, every note imbued with a power that made the judges' jaws drop and the audience sit in stunned silence. Simon, usually reserved, leaned forward, his eyes glistening, captivated by something he could not have predicted. Each judge seemed to hold their breath as Michael poured his heart into the performance, letting the music tell the story he could not yet put into words. It wasn't just the technical skill that left everyone in awe. It was the emotion, the authenticity, the raw honesty of a child who had learned, too early, that life could be both beautiful and cruel. Michael's story was written in the tremor of his voice, the subtle quiver in his hands, the way he looked out into the audience as if seeing each of them individually, connecting with hearts he had never met before. In those moments, it was not a competition. It was a confession, a gift, a shared human experience that transcended age, fame, and expectation. The song ended with a soft, lingering note that seemed to hang in the air long after the last vibration had faded. The silence that followed was absolute, a collective inhale that felt like the world itself was holding its breath, savoring the beauty of what had just occurred. Then, as if a dam had broken, the audience erupted into thunderous applause. Tears streamed down faces, strangers held hands, some laughed through their tears, unable to contain the overwhelming emotion that the boy had conjured. The judges were on their feet, a standing ovation erupting from the stage to the very back of the hall. Simon, usually stoic, had tears glistening on his cheeks, his voice catching as he whispered, "I've never heard anything like this." Michael opened his eyes, blinking rapidly as he looked at the sea of faces that had just witnessed his heart. His mother rushed forward, enveloping him in a hug that spoke volumes without a single word. The boy who had been nervous, uncertain, trembling with anticipation only moments ago, now stood tall, glowing with a light that only comes from realizing that one's dreams are no longer just dreams. They are real, alive, and powerful enough to move the world. Backstage, reporters clamored to capture every word, every moment, but Michael was no longer focused on them. His focus was inward, on the journey that had brought him here. On the nights of quiet determination, the tears shed in solitude, the music played in empty rooms, the unwavering belief that his voice mattered. That belief had carried him here, onto this stage, into the hearts of millions. When the judges asked him about the story behind his performance, Michael spoke softly, humbly, yet with a clarity that resonated with every listener. I sing because music is how I feel what words cannot say. It's how I share my heart, and I hope that maybe, someone listening will feel less alone. The simplicity of his words carried the weight of profound wisdom. The audience, still in awe, nodded and whispered among themselves. They knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a performance that would linger in their memories, a story of courage and hope told not in essays or speeches, but in music, in a voice that transcended age and experience. That night, as Michael left the stage, lights dimming behind him, cameras flashing, hearts still racing, there was an unspoken understanding. Talent, yes, it could be measured. But courage, authenticity, and the ability to move people, that was something far greater. And this 9-year-old boy, with a heart full of music and dreams bigger than the sky, had done exactly that. He had reminded the world, in the most beautiful, human way possible, that even the smallest among us can make the biggest impact when we dare to share our true voice. The story of Michael, the 9-year-old with the heart of a giant, spread across the nation like wildfire. Social media was flooded with clips, hashtags, and heartfelt messages from people who had watched his performance, who had felt their own emotions reflected in his music. Letters poured in from children and adults alike, all saying the same thing: thank you for showing us that dreams are worth chasing. Thank you for giving us hope. Even months later, his performance was remembered not just for the technical brilliance, but for the emotional truth it carried. Schools invited him to speak about the power of music. Charities featured him in campaigns to inspire children. And Michael, now aware of the effect his story could have, continued to sing, not for fame, not for accolades, but for the simple, pure purpose of touching hearts. Because in that moment, on a stage that seemed too big for his tiny frame, Michael had done something extraordinary. He had proven that a voice,